Hi everyone. So this week you are finishing up your formal proposals and preparing to submit those to me on Friday. As you already know, you'll get feedback from your TAs this week. You'll make those changes, producing the absolute best, highest quality document that you can, and then one of you from your group will email that to me, to my first class email address, by 5 p.m. on this coming Friday in order to have your proposal reviewed. We'll spend some time later this week in class assigning slots to meet with me next week. I'll meet with each group individually for about 15 minutes where we'll talk about the proposal and look to see what we need to do in order to get it approved so that you can begin collecting data. This week I want to talk just a little bit about some components of the formal proposal and start to talk a little bit about APA style. Now, most of your teaching on APA style is going to come from your TAs, but I'm going to point you in the right direction to start to work on these things before you get into lab. So you are already very familiar with this document. This is the example for the formal proposal. And so you've already created all of this information, but some of the things that you might have had a few problems with are to deal with APA style. And you'll notice if you look at the rubric at the end of the syllabus, you'll see that a significant portion of your final grade on your paper comes from your ability to write within the style of our discipline. This book, the APA Publication Manual, was required for the class, and it describes how we write as psychologists. I realize that style is not the most exciting part of this course, and that literary style and writing style are complicated and sometimes frustrating, but the reason for APA style is to make sure that all of our writing is interpretable to each other in an increasingly international scientific community. It's actually quite simple. It just requires you to understand the rules, and once you start thinking in APA, it'll actually be a lot easier for you to do. The thing that most people are familiar with writing styles are the different ways that different disciplines demonstrate the references that they've used for their research. And in this case, in APA, you'll see that these different style guides focus on different things because different disciplines highlight different things. So for instance here, in APA what's important to us are the authors and the year, and that's what comes first. It tells us who wrote the paper, what year it was, so that we can find it easily in our indices of journals. Then it tells us what the title is, the journal that it comes from, the volume, and the page number, such that we can search for this journal extremely easily and be able to find this information. This is the standard way of citing information in APA. This is what it looks like for a empirical journal article. This is roughly what your references should look like. Now, they won't all be in italics. Those are in italics because this is the example document, and I've given the examples in italics. But you should follow the publication manual to the letter to show what resources that you used. And you should list all of your resources that appear in your paper here. You don't have to list resources that you looked at but you didn't include in your paper. Only things that appear in the manuscript should appear here in the references section. There are differences between the references section of your document and the in-text citations of those documents that are pointing people towards this references section. So inside the document, I would have something that looks a little bit different. So up here in my example, I've described my measures and given the citation. So in this case, the 10-item personality index, the TIPI, comes from Gosling, Renfro, and Swan, 2003. I followed the APA instructions for in-text citations here by providing the author's names inside of parentheses linked with an ampersand and the year so that I can easily scroll down into references and find that full citation here. The APA Style Guide is your ultimate source for exactly how to format information. However, if you're just looking for some quick information about how to do references, Purdue University has a wonderful website called the OWL. You can see the Purdue Online Writing Lab, or OWL, here, where it describes APA headings, and seriation is the section I've looked at, but each of these sections here you can see on the left-hand side, from general formatting, that talks about basic guidelines, what your title page should look like. It's essentially broken down, the APA 6th edition manual, into a readable online format. It tells you how to do in-text citations, as well as reference lists for basic rules, and then if you're citing something that isn't a basic journal article, it shows you how to cite other information like books or electronic sources. This is really valuable for a quick index. Again, I encourage you to use the APA publication manual most of the time because it's guaranteed to be correct. Most of the time I encourage you to use the APA publication manual, but if you're looking for something quick, this Purdue OWL website, you can see the link up here, and your TAs can provide you this link, will be helpful in figuring out how to cite something quickly. I encourage you when it comes to your references section to make sure that you are doing this as you go along. Don't wait until the end of your project when you're writing your proposal and then have to spend 2 days tracking down articles that you had read long ago that you could have cited easily, but now you have to track them down. Build your references section as you go. More than just your references section, APA style describes how each section of your ultimate manuscript should be written. So now that you are submitting your formal proposal, you actually have written a pretty significant portion of your methods section for your final paper in the class. So even though it's quite early, I encourage you to go ahead and have a Word document that you're working on as your final paper already. You can take a look at the APA manual and figure out what kinds of title page you'll need, what kinds of headings need to be included, and how those headings need to be structured. But let me just give you an example from a manuscript that I'm currently working on right now. This is a paper on attitudes about atheists. So you'll begin working on your methods section shortly. So this will be a good example for you to see how a methods section is formatted in APA format. So you'll see it begins with a level 1 heading for method, and then the methods section is typically broken up into several subsections. The first subsection of a methods section is typically the participants section. Now, this is a section where you identify who the participants in this study were and how they were sampled. So you're going to describe the sample. In this case, I've described a sample from a state university in New England, which equals 110 participants, and described that sample based on their gender breakdown, their racial breakdown, and their religiousness breakdown, because this is a paper on religiousness. So in this case, I've described how we recruited participants and exactly sort of what the participant sample was made up of. Below the participant section, we begin to describe the methodology in such a way that somebody reading this article could recreate the study exactly to see if they find the same results in a different sample. So the materials and procedures section often has several subheadings. So in this case, I will describe exactly what participants did. So here I usually start out by talking about how participants came in, whether they were seated, whether they were by themselves, or whether they were in a mass group. And then I begin talking about either manipulations, independent variables, or my measurements and what they were, exactly what measures I used, and how those measures were scored. So in this case, I'm interested in attitudes towards atheists. So I have an entire subsection about how I've measured attitudes towards atheists. I'm citing my intergroup anxiety measure here, Stefan and Stefan, and I've described what that measure is like and how that measure is scored. 1 equals X, 5 equals Y. Then I describe other measures that I've used and where those measures come from. You've already done this section in a large part on your proposal document. So your goal as you begin your methods section is to transform your proposal into a description of what you've done that makes sense in this kind of format, and uses, of course, past tense because you will have done the project before you report it. Some of you will have, these are all measures here that I'm scrolling past, some of you will have a different method where you have manipulations. And so you can see here I have the same sort of method section, this is a second study, same participants sections where I've described the participant pool. Then in the materials and procedures section, I have this imagined interaction section. And I've described the manipulation, and in this case the manipulation is where one group is asked to please spend the next 3 minutes imagining that you are meeting someone who is an atheist for the first time. The other group is asked to, for the next 3 minutes, please think about atheists. So I've described an instructional manipulation here that is the independent variable, and I described that task in enough detail that anyone reading it could recreate the situation of the study and see if they get the same results. So the methods section is your roadmap, and even though you haven't completed the study, you can get big chunks of your methods section already written based on what you've decided to do and what's been approved. So I encourage you to go ahead and start constructing this, because your methods section is due in week 8, which is not that far away, and you'll be collecting data in the meantime. So begin working on that now, and let myself or your TAs know if you have any questions.